Welcome to Happily Ever Aftermath.
The podcast where we discuss relationships in movies and our relationships with them.
I'm Polina Grunbaum.
And I'm Diana Rojek Skonnord.
Hello. How you doing?
I'm doing really good. How are you doing?
I am doing well.
For a minute, I didn't realize you were talking to me.
It's true. There are two of you. We'll get to that in a minute. So welcome back. This week, we are doing Being John Malkovich.
Yes.
Which is from 1999.
Yes, and we have a special guest with us, Ryan, guy I married.
Hi.
Yes, he's here.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I'm trying really hard not to be snarky.
You're not going to last long.
She's really not.
You're just not.
It's really good to be here. Liar!
Well, I'm happy to be here because I formerly worked with Ryan and I miss him. I am not. That is not a lie. So I'm going to introduce this rather strange movie. This was my pick. And we'll talk about what inspired that pick in a minute. So in this quirky cult favorite comedy, unemployed New York City puppeteer Craig Schwartz, played by John Cusack, reluctantly takes a temp job as a filing clerk for the eccentric Dr. Lester Orson Bean. While at work, Craig discovers a portal that leads into the mind of renowned actor John Malkovich, of the title. When he lets his attractive coworker Maxine, Catherine Keener, in on the secret, they both begin an unusual business scheme and an odd relationship that involves Craig's restless wife, Lottie, played by Cameron Diaz. That is from the Google search of this movie, and it seemed good enough.
Google isn't really forthright in where it came from, so
Yeah.
Thanks, Google generic box office.
Yeah, whoever you are who spent all this time writing it, now you're just a faceless entity.
You are Google.
Yes,
Yeah.
all of Google.
Yes, and it's very important to point out that this is the beginning of our beautiful Cusack run.
Oh, Cusack run. I've been looking forward to Cusack run for a long time.
So we're going to be doing a series of movies with the wonderful actor John Cusack, and I've decided that since he has so many, if we decide to revisit it...
It could happen.
No, I'm going to call it Tusack.
Oh!
But that sounds kind of gross, so I'm going to rethink
Tusack.
that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway. For the record, John Cusack was my first celebrity crush. I'm not alone.
He's pretty high up there.
Damn it, I'm not alone.
No, you are not alone.
Thank you.
You are not alone.
Ryan, I'm not alone.
So my question about your Cusack run, will you be doing Con Air? Because if you like John Malkovich...
There's only two people in this world I trust. One of them's me. The other's not you.
Not anymore?
So we'll be talking about relationships in this podcast.
Hey, I was making the point that Con Air might fit.
I'm in.
If you'd like to vote for Con Air for a part of our second series of Cusack run,
please tweet at us.
Please tweet at us at
HEAMCast.
It's a fine bromance movie. I apologize for using that word, but...
Liar! All right.
So I will tell you, I saw this movie during a strange, just a time of transition in my life, and I really loved it, and it has John Cusack in it. So that's kind of why we're here.
I was kind of concerned that I just said the word Cusack. I'm like, I got a great idea, and I'm like, all right, let's finish this thought before I judge. Being John Malkovich, let her go. Let's see where this is going.
To be fair, my original was But Let's Over Broadway.
No, I know, you told me. And then I was wondering about that one myself.
Yep. That might have been a better choice.
John Cusack also in that movie.
Yes.
I think your original choice was Broadcast News, where he has a voice
joke.
Cameo.
To be fair, that was a joke.
And yet we did the episode.
We did it. It was sort of a preview of the Cusack run.
Cusack is awesome.
So if that's Polina's reason for being here to discuss that movie,
yes,
is
what's
now
yours?
an opportune time to say why I'm here?
Why are you here?
Yeah.
I mostly just like this movie.
It is a good movie.
It is a good movie.
I didn't care for it the first time, but that's just like the story of my life. That's actually the story of my favorite movies. I didn't like them the first time I saw them.
All of them, like the entire list of 5, right?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, God. Let's talk about that. I loved it the first time.
Okay.
Rewatched it didn't like it recently, then rewatched it and loved it again.
I have a question.
Yes.
I will have many questions.
Yes.
When you watch a movie and you don't like it, what compels you to watch it again?
I have a podcast in which I want to watch movies.
This was a generic question, not being John Malkovich or not the movies we talk about on this podcast. Does that happen very often where you revisit a movie and it turns out,
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I think it happens with lots of things. Music, books. Probably happens to me with books more.
Okay,
Like,
so-
I feel guilty for not liking it.
Several follow-up questions. Yeah. Music makes sense because you could be walking down a hallway, somebody's blasting it out of a boombox. Hint for later episodes. And you decide that you like the episode.
Or standing outside.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It might be raining.
Might be.
Damn it, he's good in the rain. No, seriously. I've reached this point in my life where, oh, that sucked. Not going to watch that movie again. And then I don't. And then I move on with my life.
But you just said that your 5 movies were ones that you didn't like the first time, but you rewatched them. I think it's usually that you have to. Well, I think that's the thing. Like, I don't usually go, hey, you know what? I really, really hated that movie. It is Friday night. I am going to sit down in front of it. It's usually like I'm on a plane. I'm with a friend. I am compelled by some outside force outside of my own choice, because usually like I would just be like, oh my God, there's so many movies that I have to see. So it's usually because I'm compelled. Like, it's usually that circumstances.
Well, that makes a lot more sense. And to answer your question, he typically throws me back into the movie. And so it's just like, he's like, come on, it was so good. I'm like, eh.
Yeah, our relationship with movies is like, I'm typically a lot easier to please.
He does enjoy the Resident Evil franchise.
Mostly just due to loyalty to the video game series. Although I only really played one of those.
I do like a man with low standards.
Yes.
But yeah,
Don't laugh too hard at that.
It's important. It's important to figure out what you really want in a man, I think.
No
and
comment.
if that's one of them.
I do find myself looking for something to like a little bit harder than you tend to, and when we're having the follow-up conversations, it's usually me like, come on, this part was pretty good. And
I'm not denying that, but overall my thoughts are,
I generally am like that too. Like, I feel like if I've committed, especially if I've gone to see a movie that is like, that I've read a lot about, I work really, and I feel like I ought to like it. I think that's like one thing that's been freeing about having the podcast is like, I can like talk about things I actually like, which is when I was a teenager, like I really felt kind of oppressed by my parents, sort of like,
so bad
tension
every time
of
you
quality. But yeah, but it's okay. Cause I'm an adult and I get to like whatever I like.
yeah, and I can tell you,
Really, Mom, I swear.
I was watching bits and pieces of The Hottie and the Naughty the other day.
What is the Hottie and the Naughty?
It's the amazing Paris Hilton vehicle. It's
Oh
horrible.
my God, that sounds so bad.
No more shame. No, I'm ashamed of that one. I'm sorry.
I would be ashamed of that
I'm
one.
very ashamed of that one. To be fair, all the scenes that I was watching, she wasn't in them.
So you basically have the non-Paris Hilton edit of the Paris Hilton
it's
vehicle.
YouTube. They show the end and they show all the
okay.
funny scenes and everything. And I'm just like, oh, it's the girl from Step by Step. I thought she was cool. What is she doing in this? Oh, getting paid. I understand now. Okay.
Getting paid, which goes back to this movie.
I can make a connection if I really tried hard. Go.
I'm
Okay.
sure the actors were paid.
All of them.
Yeah.
But yes, I want to hear this connection.
So I guess the connection is that a lot of this movie is sort of about what is valued. Like, Maxine, who is the Catherine Keener, I keep doing that. Keener character. Keener character.
Maxine.
So Craig basically, Craig is a puppeteer. And
John Cusack.
Yes, John Cusack is a puppeteer, and there's a scene in which his wife comes home from work or is actually going to work. Cameron Diaz, Lottie, and she goes, it's like, how was your day? And he basically is like, yeah, the puppet game, it's just not valued. And then later on in the movie, and explaining the plot of this movie is like just beyond us for an hour. So we're just going to jump, like I would say of all of the episodes in which having seen this movie is useful, this may be the one. But later on, basically John Malkovich, he takes over the body of John Malkovich. And in 8 months, John Malkovich becomes a successful puppeteer. And there's this whole thing about that, like, because of his name, suddenly puppeteering is instantly valued.
Yeah, it becomes a whole fad, right?
Yeah.
Like Sean Penn is saying that he cameos and he's talking about like he would get into it if people did just think that he was imitating John Malkovich.
Well, he would be.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
To be fair.
I kind of feel the same thing about anything that I do. Well, I'm just copying this other person in the world, so.
Yeah.
Man, someone else has a podcast already. That's not original.
Asshole. They got to it before I did.
Other people have a podcast? Why
Actually-
didn't you tell me this before?
To be honest, when I finally met other people who are doing podcasts about romantic comedies, I'm just like, that was our original idea. Damn it, someone else is doing it and doing it better.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to switch.
Yeah. There's always so much we have to switch. It's damn it, we're not good at this.
It's tricky. It's tricky to put yourself out there.
Next episode, the hottie and the naughty.
No, please don't make me do that. Please, please,
No.
for the love of God.
My relationship-
Plus, you got me on a Cusack run. I need to be on the Cusack run. I don't want to be off the Cusack run.
Well, it
not in
turns
that
out
movie?
he was the voice of the angry messenger in that movie. Playing a boombox outside.
that's it? Is it unless it happens for more than 20% of the movie? I just don't know if I can do it. But I made you see this and Gothic.
There is no okay, Gothic, yes. Okay, so back to what you were saying before, and I buy into it. Okay, for those of you who do not watch the movies and listen to us because you like us, God bless you, go watch this movie because we cannot explain this movie. There is no explaining this movie.
Plus, it makes no sense.
Yeah, she got 2 sentences into that where John Malkovich is taken over by John Cusack's character, and he becomes a puppeteer, and your relationship with it is the fact that because John Cusack used John Malkovich's notoriety to become a famous puppeteer, that's one part. That's like 4 minutes of the movie.
So it's just too hard. So I guess like most of my, like when I watched it, I'll go briefly with, because there's so much to talk about here, and actually I find my relationship with it the most boring. So I'm just gonna go with I watched it, as I said, came out in 1999, which it was kind of a boom, like there was a bust cycle, and I didn't have, I was having a lot of like an identity crisis of kind of what to do next. And
when you say boom bust, do you mean?
I mean like
yourself,
economically.
your career,
I mean
career,
my career,
the economic.
the career I was in went through a bust cycle.
Okay.
And so and there was just, to me, a lot of this movie is sort of how do I just was like, I loved it because it was so weird and things felt very strange and unsettled in my life. And so I guess like this movie and a lot of the themes of like self and self having to do with work and self having to do with yourself, like who you are in relationships, sort of, that's probably what got me into this movie. Mm-hmm. It also could have been because it's just a really strange and interesting movie. Mm-hmm. But it was 1999, so I was an adult. Like I did not see this movie as a teenager because I'm not.
I was trying to pin that down myself because I'm trying to remember the first time I saw it, and we were just trying to do them. When did we come up with? Maybe sometime.
It would have been like early to mid aughts. So like the movie would have been
like on the video.
Old or so.
Okay.
Yeah, it was
definitely,
it was on
definitely
DVD.
on DVD.
So you guys saw it together, and what?
I don't remember that, but
think
apparently,
we did.
See, it's funny because I remember very distinctly seeing it with my husband, and he is like, I don't remember if I saw it in the theater, and I'm like, I think I remember because it sort of started this trip of like, with like Lottie and Craig's relationship is like pretty pretty dead.
Horrible.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, is that going to happen to us?
Wow.
Yeah.
This really got to you.
It could just, yeah. As I said, it was a sensitive time. Anyway, the end.
I actually had kind of a funny personal resonance watching it this time. That Craig's early interactions with Maxine before they were like really involved with each other, but when he was like basically like attracted to her and wanted to date her or get into an affair with her.
Yeah, what's up with that? Just
Yeah.
No, keep going.
Yeah.
Well, not to the full extent, but it sort of actually reminded me of like myself before I was with Diana. Which would have been like as an awkward single teenager, where I would get into these like platonic friendships with girls who were perfectly nice to me, but were far too cool for me. And I just I thought that character dynamic was really interesting. How Maxine in general sort of anchoring this movie, where like the plot doesn't really work if like everyone isn't into her.
Yeah, if she isn't like super magnetic and amazing, and they didn't really know, they don't even know why, because she's pretty nasty.
She's a pretty horrible person.
Yeah.
And yet very likable, like realistically charming, but in a really sociopathic way.
Yeah, there's something about her, and that was the thing of watching it the second time. Was like, I was like, what is it about this woman? But I totally get it, because her whole thing is like, she once pulled, like, there's that scene when they're in the bar, and you can you can get why he's like, he wants so desperately to make her like him.
Yes.
And you can really see why, because there's something like at once like when she turns her gaze on you, she's like really, really seeing you, but in all the ways, like bad, good, like she's just like, show me. And you want to demonstrate something other than what he does. And like, yeah, their interaction is like, she literally turns him down at every turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he just does not give up. And none of this is to say that my female friends in high school were like sociopaths, but
yes, I'm hoping not.
But they were definitely
that would make me very sad.
Teenage girls, maybe a little.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I mean, more than the average.
So when I was rewatching this and just paying attention to Maxine, I'm like, garbage person, don't care for her at all. But she is on the mean side. So hate her the most. Whereas he was pointing out, like, everyone's horrible in this movie. I'm like,
Lottie is horrible in this movie.
Lottie is horrible in this movie. Craig is horrible.
Craig is appalling.
And this is my relationship with this movie. I was out to see every John Cusack movie I could. I'm like, yay, John Cusack movie. Let's watch this. What's happening? What's happening right now? First of all, shave. Second of all, haircut. Second of all,
posture.
Again, no. Third of all, get a job.
He did.
Better job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I wrote 2 notes as I watched this movie because as I rewatched it, very much enjoyed it.
Oh, good.
Really, really good. Laughed a lot. Again, it was on the second viewing, again, being forced into a second viewing.
Yeah.
A lot to enjoy. Definitely didn't get it the first time. So in my later years, I was getting the humor that's not just, the basic humor. This is a little bit more on a more...
It's really dry.
Thank you. It's words I can't figure out right now. But what I did write down is this movie is making me very claustrophobic. Be it the 7.5 floor, and then 7.5 floor goes into a portal, and the portal is shoving you into. I'm just like, I don't feel good right now. Why don't you just put me on a plane or something?
So to throw a bone to the people who haven't seen the movie, the much of the action takes place in this bizarre floor of an office building where the ceiling is only like about 5 feet away from the floor, so everyone has to walk around hunched down at all times.
Yeah, and they have this video that they have this intro video that they have to watch, and it's like it's these actors. It's like it's supposed to be like the 1800s, but the building like looks like it was built in like the 60s, and so it's.
I was more amused about the video. It's like it's the 70s,
Yeah.
What's up with the 7.5 floor, Diane?
Yeah.
I'm glad you asked.
Yeah. It's so odd. And they have this whole like reenactment where this this Irish guy, and this woman walks in, like this diminutive woman walks in and says, you know, I want a place to work in peace because ceilings mock me. Like, and he goes, I will take you as my wife. Like, what? Like, and it's supposed to be an industrial.
And he's like all kindly and grandfatherly and says, and I shall build a place for your accursed kind.
But he's actually not, because the first thing he says is do you want, if you are coming here looking for money, I do not. It just like makes no sense. And it's clearly not true, because the elevator doesn't stop there. Like, if they actually built it, the elevator would stop there.
Yeah, and it becomes evident toward the end that the building was probably built around the portal. So that presumably is the reason why the architecture is so strange.
And it's also a great running gag that every time you hear the siren go off in the elevator, just like off in the background because people are leaving the day, and it just all of a sudden you hear like, you know, in the background, it's like, oh, someone's trying to get on the elevator.
Exactly.
It's really funny. Little half observation. I love people in their early roles.
Yep.
Did you check out Octavia Spencer?
Octavia
as the
Spencer
person who lets John Cusack into the 7.5 floor?
Yeah, she teaches him how to get into the 7.5 floor, which sort of is like, when you think that for some reason, when I thought of it, I thought of like the whole Harry Potter, you know, like getting on the train thing.
Oh, right.
But this is like so quotidian, where basically there's this like, they watch and see if it goes between the 7th and 8th floors, and at some point they just take like a big metal stick and stick it in and open and try to like shove the door open and
pry
then
it open Die Hard style.
Die Hard style.
My favorite thing about that scene is that it's like so bizarre, and like John Cusack is playing it as like he's so shocked by this and trying to keep his cool, and the little detail that the door is like all dented all to hell.
That's
like,
my favorite thing. Like
again.
Basically, yeah, that was my favorite little detail too. Like, there's so many great things. Like, when I saw this movie, I think when I was rewatching it, like for the podcast the first time, I was sort of like, I think I was trying to come up with this, you know, like, this time I'm gonna like follow the intellectual like heart of this movie, and I almost forgot to watch it as a comedy. And so I didn't laugh like at all during watching it. And
me too, the first time.
Yeah.
All those years ago.
But then like because I kind of watched it in 2 parts.
Okay.
And then I was like, I watched half of it and I was getting dressed to go out. And like the whole time I'm sitting there like, you know, blow drying my hair or whatever, and just like laughing, like reliving scenes in my head and like laughing. And just I kept doing that like all the rest of the day until the second day, until we even rewatching it on the train. And even like, it's one of those movies where I'm not really a laugh out loud kind of like film person for some reason anyway. I don't know why. But this movie has so many great set pieces that you kind of almost I need to replay them in my head to like appreciate them.
It's really difficult to explain. When we were done watching the movie, we were just laughing at parts. And the thing is, all we said were just like little descriptions, and then we're laughing because there's no explaining it. Yeah. And also I asked, why is this funny? I don't know.
It's like you can take the lines out of context and they make just as much sense as when they were in context.
It's absurd. Am I laughing because it's absurd?
Yes.
Okay, that feels a little bit better.
I mean, it feels like it's kind of absurd and yet so rooted, like a lot of the genius absurdism is like, it's so rooted in reality. Excuse me. It's so rooted in like what office life kind of feels like when you're new, and what an interview feels like when you're new, and what a dead, like sort of a weird relationship feels like when you're new. Like, you know, that they have this chimp between them that they're like, so they have all these animals, and one of them is this like chimp that's getting psychotherapy.
traumatic experience when younger.
Which amazingly turned out to be true.
Turns out to be true. Yeah.
And it's so amazing. And he has an arc. The chimp has an
The
arc.
chimp does have an arc.
But just explaining that, the absurdity of working in an office. I mean, like when your boss thinks he has a speech impediment, but it turns out it's because there's a problem with the receptionist.
Totally.
And he's attracted to her, therefore he doesn't want to like mess
and then you
that up.
see that he goes back. Like
yeah.
she's married. He becomes John. Like,
see this movie.
oh my god, it's just too hard. It's too hard. I think we're just.
I don't.
No, I think we can synopsize.
Yeah.
this.
Can you?
I-
Ryan's good at this.
I made a real effort to follow the plot a bit more closely because I
Mm-hmm.
remember being confused by it the first time through. So,
Yeah.
so this time I studied.
Yeah.
And so
Me too.
So the ending of the movie is that the boss, Lester, has succeeded in assimilating the body of John Malkovich because the big reveal is that this is part of sort of an ongoing conspiracy to transfer his own mind and the minds of some of his friends into younger bodies so that he can live forever. And that everything that transpires in the movie is sort of a side effect because John Malkovich isn't old enough to become a full host yet. So the ending of the movie...
He is not ripe.
He's not ripe, yes. Actually, you know what? I don't think I even caught this detail at the end that his wife was the receptionist from...
Oh, you didn't notice that?
No, I didn't. Yeah.
Oh,
that's
no.
Yeah,
When
that was
they,
awesome.
Okay, so...
And she thinks that Charlie Sheen is saying something else.
Yeah.
In the brilliance of casting, you've got John Malkovich. His friend is played by Charlie Sheen, Charlie Sheen. As himself. And there's a comment that Dr. Lester makes early on when he's making horrifically inappropriate comments about his executive liaison, as he called her. It's like, we don't call her a secretary. Are you implying that I'm banging her? No, sir.
No, sir.
Not that I wouldn't want to.
I'm not, but...
And then later on, he describes what he'd like to do to her
yeah.
in detail.
detail,
And
which is
John
great.
Cusack has to go like, oh, I can't. And then he meets her for carrot juice.
It's important that we
while
not
he
call him
goes
John
into-
Cusack because that's going to get
Yes,
confusing. It's Charlie
yes.
Sheen and
It's-
Sean
yes.
Penn. And...
So
Yes.
this is actually
Craig
so
Schwartz.
Craig, he's actually and you know what? He is absolutely the most diplomatic in terms of like, I don't, it's not that I don't want to get fired, but at the same time, he doesn't want to like any confrontation whatsoever. As much
Patience
as,
of a saint with all these insane people.
as much as I appreciate you having the confidence to share this with me,
Yeah.
Dr. Lester, I feel that this environment at work is not the most appropriate environment for us to be having this conversation, which is code for you sick man.
Yeah.
She's, gross.
And then he describes it to Lottie as like, it would be really funny if once you get over how disgusting it is.
Really, it's-
And then he meets him for carrot juice to discuss these fantasies in detail.
Yeah, it's like a callback to when he's talking about how the reason he's... I think he actually says he's 105, which
Yes.
might have been foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Like he might have been saying his actual age instead of his physical age, foreshadowing that he's already like swapped into a younger body once. And then he says that like it's because he drinks a lot of carrot juice. And then like 10 minutes after that, there's this hilarious like offhand callback. Oh yeah, meet me for a drink. We'll be at the Juiceatorium.
He also, I just realized that at the so at some point Lottie goes to find Dr. Lester because because Craig has basically taken over John Malkovich's body and he treating him as a puppeteer would a puppet. And so Lottie goes and he goes, I'm not Dr. Lester, I'm Captain, and I forget the name of the captain. And then I realized
from the name of the building.
yeah, and then I didn't even catch that until I saw it
is that what you're
twice,
gonna
and
say?
then I was walking here and I go, oh my God, it's Captain and the name of I forgot the name of the building now, but
Martin Flemmer?
Martin Flemmer, yeah.
Well, what's also interesting is that in that video that they're
That's
showing
what
to
I'm
ex-
saying,
to
yeah.
explain their, named by this man and presumably by another man named Flemmer.
yeah.
In the video,
It's so
it's just it's so. I don't know why I'm laughing funny.
because it's just it is
ridiculous.
I
so
think I read on the
absurd.
internet that there was going to be a payoff on that got cut from the script.
It doesn't matter. I'm still laughing.
yeah.
And speaking of payoff, we were mentioning it. So Dr. Lester is in the body of John Malkovich, making the comment that if he were so many years younger, he would have, gotten together with his executive liaison. And then as John Malkovich, you see that he has married her.
Yes.
And they're living their lives
Yeah.
together. Yeah, it's really cool.
So since we're just kind of listing off the absurdities in the movie, I want to come back to what you were saying about how that is kind of like a through line of the story. And if I could take this up, make it a little bit cerebral, I would venture that the movie is not just absurd, but I'd call it absurdist.
Mm-hmm.
What's
Like,
the difference?
Meaning.
I don't know. Well, one of them's like scholarly, but
Which one is which?
okay. So I'm going to be a little bit out of my depth here because I'm not going to pretend to be a literary expert, although I do geek out about it on occasion. And absurdism is like this movement in literature literature and philosophy that basically tries to use the absurd to expose truths about reality. Like, oh, what are we all doing here? And
Yeah, I think that's it. Like,
Yeah, so
that is, I agree. Like, it definitely falls into that genre, which is why it is so funny and fun and interesting to think about.
Yeah.
And why maybe sometimes knowing that if you don't know that, it makes walking into it a little difficult because you're like, where do I put this movie? Like, what do I do with it? Am I supposed to take it seriously? Am I supposed to like the characters? Am I supposed to, but it's letting go of that, and it makes it much easier to fall into, I think.
Yeah, I think if you're going to compare this movie to one of the classics, it reminds me of Waiting for Godot, like in spades.
Yeah.
Which is this very cerebral and philosophical and very surreal play with this kind of minimalistic plot where there's just 4 characters who sit around waiting for this 5th character to show up, and then he never comes, and they talk about it, and there's all these like parallels to like, oh, what does it mean to be alive when life doesn't have any meaning, except that that's not really what the play is like, because the play is really funny.
Yeah.
Just like this movie is really funny. So I mean, I've always enjoyed that can like, you think of like a movie with a big existential point like that, you would assume it's going to be like really dry, but this is dry humor, and that makes it super entertaining, which is great. So
it's funny. I was actually thinking of Krapp's Last Tape. I was thinking of Krapp's Last Tape.
Oh, I don't know.
Instead, it's also Beckett. It's like, it's great, and there's it's basically a guy who every year on his on New Year's. Makes a recording, and it's basically like the end of his life, and he's sitting there making this recording. It's a rather short play, but it has all these like really strange things where like he goes off into he'll go off into talking about somebody, and it's like, it's very much like, you realize like, first the character's introduced and it's like, a terrible character. And then you realize like, oh, it's actually Kraps, who's like like they're kind of acting the way they're supposed to because they're set up. But there's all these like really odd little moments, like, like the big thing is that he eats all these bananas during the whole thing. And so it's just very odd. And I don't know. It just for some reason, like, it reminded me of it the first time I rewatched it.
Yeah, I'll have to put that on the list.
Like texture.
Right after adaptation.
The texture of it.
This movie also made me feel dumb for never having seen, because I imagine
it's
I really
great.
liked it. Yeah.
Well, it's so weird because, you mentioned Waiting for a Godot and you were talking about Beckett. I mean, when I watched this movie, my brain immediately went to Team America World Police.
Oh,
Yeah.
which I can see now that you say it.
Why wouldn't you? Top 10 puppet movies, go.
Yeah. That's funny. I actually forgot about the puppet. I was more like,
Okay.
Like,
Polina,
there are these
what's-
ridiculous setups and
With puppets?
with,
Wow.
okay, maybe puppets.
Could
You really get lost in this movie.
I
Make
just
the
really,
argument that that's an absurdist movie. I guess it kind of is.
it kind of is.
Matt Damon.
Um,
That's all I got.
so,
Well,
I don't know Beckett. I just that was actually my first note. Team America.
I love the 2 notes. One is Team America.
One is Team America. The other one is so claustrophobic.
Oh, and before we get off of the other absurdist works thing, can I interject my story here? This is very tangential, but another play that follows in the vein of Waiting for Godot is a little movie called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that one?
Oh, yeah.
Diana and I have a little smidgen of history with that because that was probably like maybe the 5th or so movie that we ever watched together. When
Who's
we were,
counting?
Like the first few months when we were dating,
Mm-hmm.
which was fun because back then, like mostly all we did was watch movies, and when we would see each other, like maybe half of it was actual dates, and the half was just hanging out with our group of friends with like the rotation of DVD rentals. And I remember that was like my first turn to like pick a movie, and I was dating this girl who had this really impressive taste in movies, and she was broadening all my horizons. So I wanted to be able to bring the big guns with something that's really cerebral and also really funny, much like being John Malkovich.
Did it work?
Well, he may have introduced Gary Oldman and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead, but my suggestion was The Professional, so I win.
You're saying that's a better Gary Oldman movie?
Yes.
I would agree.
Thank you.
And you also introduced one of the better works of Tim Roth because you made me watch Reservoir Dogs for the first time.
Which now it's at this point where it's like, I'm over Tarantino. And
I'm a much bigger Tarantino fan than you right now. That's quite a reversal. From...
So basically you started it and now you're like, I'm out.
No, I'm making you watch movies.
No, I will end it.
My relation with my husband with movies is that he spent a lot more time hanging out, watching movies that I want to see and never got around to. And so like it was very frustrating because we would go, when you went to the DVD store or the video store or whatever it was, when you went to like a Blockbuster or something, it was always like, oh my God, that movie is so great. I can't believe you've never seen it. Let's go watch it. No, I've seen it so many times.
Oh, he would say that?
Yes. And so there's all these movies that like, I really, really wish I'd seen. But I'm like, yeah, but I had a class in early African film, and I've seen all those films.
When we were getting to I was comfortable enough to show him my crazy. We would spend hours in Blockbusters and Hollywood Videos arguing over what to see. Not like arguing.
Yeah, just like debating.
If I'm going to spend my time watching a movie, it's not going to be this one, but maybe it should be this one. I really should see this one.
You would spend enough time rejecting the movies to have actually seen one of them.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it's awful. Like, so we used to have the one when my husband and I started dating, there's a movie theater called La Video that was near my apartment. And it's like a total cinephiles video store. Mm-hmm. So everything's arranged in this, like there's like one little new releases section, but then everything else is arranged like
autobiographically.
Kind of. It's like there's like the Polish films, and then it's just very, anyone who's ever been to La Video or the old La Video, it's slightly different now.
Or the new old La Video.
Yeah. It kind of became it's now a bookstore and a video store at the same time. Mostly a bookstore. But it was like, and so they would have some things by director and some things by time. It was just by like era, some things by genre. And it was like, so going in there was, 1 minute you're like, yeah, I do want to see this Western. And then like you look over and there's,
Hitchcock.
like John Hughes movies, or Hitchcock or whatever. And it's just like,
Yep. It's called Netflix streaming now. Where you just swipe and it's like, oh, I want to see that too.
Yeah.
I want to see that too.
Oh, it's
and then I fall
awful.
asleep. Yeah, no, I don't even need Ryan for my arguments anymore. I just argue with my tablet.
Oh my God. Every time I come home and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to watch a movie, and I just end up psyching myself out because I get into this like, this is my one night ever. It's like the last movie I'll ever see, and it better be worth it. It's really weird. I just psych myself out. But anyway, let's go back
Beastly
to
the
being
other night
absurd. I've never seen Beastly.
Don't. It's worthless.
Okay.
Yeah, it's stupid.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's Beauty and the Beast in high school.
It sounds kind of, it doesn't sound, it's either fantastic or terrible.
Neil Patrick Harris is the blind guy.
Oh.
No, it's stupid. Don't bother.
All right.
So,
anyway.
Okay, so for those of you who have never seen this movie, and this is very, very confusing, we still are going to follow our normal format. So here's an important question, Polina. When did they, I'm using air quotes, fall in love? And please define they, because that's really difficult. I couldn't prepare for this question because which they.
Yep.
So for those of you who haven't seen, in the very basic plot points, Lottie is in love with Maxine. Craig is in love with Maxine. Maxine can see that Craig can manipulate John Malkovich and therefore can serve her selfish financial purposes. But at the same time, she's in love with Lottie, but only when she is in the portal and being John Malkovich. Oh, I just did the thing there. So in the end, Craig decides to kidnap Lottie, force Lottie to call Maxine to claim that she is going to be in John Malkovich's head because Maxine keeps trying to go to John Malkovich to have sex with him when Lottie is in John Malkovich, and Craig decides to use that to have a relationship with Maxine. I'm sorry, who am I?
And at some point, he like locks Lottie up with a chimp.
With the chimp, Elijah. He has a name.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I know he has a name and an arc. I realize that.
A name, an arc,
I'm
and some
sorry,
severe
Elijah.
trauma.
I'm sorry, Elijah. I know that you've had a really difficult time, and I don't want to demean that.
We get to live his trauma in his flashback.
Oh my God, that was actually really
It
disturbing.
was really upsetting.
I completely forgot that was even in the movie. That
Me
just
too.
shocked me.
Me too. I was suddenly like, oh my God.
So traumatic.
I also fell asleep at some point. I fell asleep at some point,
you?
and I woke up. I'm not really sure. That's why I had to watch it a couple times.
No, that was in the movie.
And then I
were
woke up.
chimpanzee
I woke up
There were
during the
chimpanzees
chimp the chimp flashback scene. I was like, no.
As did he.
Yes.
So am I guessing, because they're all horrible, horrible
I
people.
say we go one by one.
Actually, what's really great, there's way too many permutations. Wait, one by one. What?
I'm with Polina here. We need to map this up because I mean, this movie is. I've been saying like I think this is a great topic for this podcast because whatever else this movie is, it is absolutely a relationship movie, and it's not about one relationship. It's about. You can't even really call it like a love triangle because there's like these three characters, but also the like added dimension of like John Malkovich's body. So it's like some kind of like weird multidimensional love pyramid. And
To recap, Maxine is in love with Lottie, but only when she's in John Malkovich.
Well, no, she's in love with Lottie all the time. Maxine thinks she's only in love with Lottie when she's in John Malkovich's body.
Maxine she claimed that the only time that she wanted to be with Lottie was when she was in John Malkovich. Lottie's in love with Maxine, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All the time. Yeah, which is also confusing because first she just thinks she's a man.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That she's actually a man.
Right.
Yeah, and she wants to go to her allergist.
I think we might need to slow down a little. On
yeah,
this.
Way too much.
Because there's a point in the movie where Lottie just says that like the experience of being in John Malkovich's head for 15 minutes has awakened her to the fact that she is a transsexual in those exact words.
Yeah,
and it's sort of treated as like she's probably the kind of person who tends to like have these awakenings of various kinds a lot, you know, the kind of like vacuously hyper spiritual person who kind of like flits from one thing to another and you know never really finds any meaning about it. So Craig is a little bit dismissive about that.
But there's no evidence of this other than the fact that she has adopted all these animals because she looks like takes care of these animals very, well, and thinks a lot about it. So like that's
I'm sort of extrapolating from Craig's reaction because it's like, oh, do you know that's just what you think because, you're a flighty person. And she does come across as like very flighty.
Yeah. And she does do the thing where she's going to talk to her allergist about it and not like a real doctor.
Yeah, exactly.
Apologize to allergists.
I'm sorry, not a doctor who should be dealing with your transgender identity crisis.
Yeah, and I mean that it was a different decade, so handling like issues of being transgendered was kind of in a different place then. But like clearly,
I think regardless, I think there's I'm not like up on the issues, but I don't know. So. Yeah.
Well, also I think there was supposed to be. When you see the number of people who go into the portal to be John Malkovich, because Craig and Maxine are selling 15 minutes and being John Malkovich for $200 a pop, everyone is having some sort of incredible experience. And I think it doesn't really...
You see all these people coming back, like, because it's $200 a pop in 1990, and they end up in the New Jersey Turnpike. We haven't talked about that.
But the whole idea is that
lines from the movie. I'm sorry,
people just keep coming back and just like the guy with his first experience of just like, can I be anybody? No, you can be John Malkovich. Oh my God, that was my second choice.
That's what I
You
wanted
never
to-
find out who his first choice is.
Oh my god, we never we haven't talked about the fact that aren't you that guy you were in that Jewel Thief
Oh my god,
movie?
the Jewel Thief movie, and then they just keep repeating it because other people have repeated it.
And then
Yeah,
the-
'cause,
and
like, Craig
he
says
was
it because he
never
heard it while he was
in the
head
John.
in it.
He was never in a Jewel Thief movie.
he was
Like,
later after this movie
Yeah.
came out, but that's
because Craig repeats that because he heard the guy say it while he was in his head, and then
Yeah.
Craig repeats that to Maxine, and then eventually gets back from Maxine back to Malkovich.
Yeah,
it's pretty great. There's just so much.
you were great in that Jewel Thief movie.
And also one, I don't even want to say it, but when Stanford from Sex and the City approaches him in the restaurant, he's like, "Hey, you're great in that movie where you played," and I'm not going to finish that sentence. But needless to say, or I will say it, he's referring to when John Malkovich played Lenny from Of Mice and Men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually, in general, I just want to say we keep talking. We're focusing on
Much
Cusack,
like-
but I want to say that Malkovich is fantastic. The actor John Malkovich is fantastic in this movie because there is no self consciousness. Like he kind of
goes all
makes
in.
he goes all in, and he kind of is this kind of idea to like 19. I was like a big John Malkovich fan.
I loved him in that one movie.
Yeah, the one movie, with the.
Yeah,
I would kind of want to do Dangerous Liaisons and anyway, but it was that thing where I was like,
you get to do that. I get to do Cruel Intentions.
oh my God, that
No.
sounds like a great. Oh, okay.
No, it's not.
Okay.
No.
All right.
but yeah, it was.
I just told you about Beauty and the Beast in high school. You want to see Dangerous Liaisons in high school?
It sounds like they bookend each other. Yes.
No.
Anyway.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about Malkovich's performance because it's weird like watching him play himself or like a version of himself. And in fact, I think they were drawing some fine distinctions. How in the credits it was like John Malkovich as John Malkovich, not John Malkovich as himself. And
John Horatio Malkovich.
oh yeah, fictional middle name. So it's like they're keeping like reality at a bit of an arm's length, where it's which is nice because it's nice not to imply that like the real John Malkovich would necessarily hook up with a stalker who calls him on the phone. But I remember watching this through like the first couple of scenes where it's just him living his mundane life and he's not aware that anything weird is going on, and he comes across as this like really weirdly stilted person.
Yeah,
like almost like he's doing a bad job of acting as himself, even though I know he's a very talented actor. And then this thing happens where like a good chunk of the movie, in fact, I want to say like maybe about half of his total screen time, he's playing Craig because it's just Craig inside his head, and like John Cusack, the actor, just sort of checks out of the movie because there's no reason for his face to appear on screen.
And yet I still felt him.
Yeah,
That's how amazing.
Yeah, and
Malkovich is in this movie.
then real life Malkovich does like a really good job of just taking over that character and playing with like the exact same mannerisms and patterns of speech, and it's like it's really impressive. And I am dangerously close to talking about Face Off now. So
I was just thinking about Face
keep me
Off.
off the Nicolas Cage movies. I'm going to keep bringing them up. We're going to hit the rock eventually.
I have 2 Nicolas Cage movies that we could talk about for this podcast.
I can't wait.
You should. Well, here, but as much as
I'm
you
going to assume one of them is not leaving Las Vegas.
don't judge my choices, Paulina. What's really
I really like that. Like, no, I need to stay away from that movie.
it's not. So as much as John Malkovich is amazing, he was also cautious enough to not want to do this movie because if it's excellent, then he'll always be associated with it. And if it's horrible, then his name is on it. So that's fine.
His name is really on it.
Really is in many ways, more ways than one. But John Cusack, as much as I adore him in the earlier roles, and I wanted to keep this pristine version of him in my brain, watching him do this gave me so much more respect for his abilities as an actor, because it's like, I hate you so much right now. And it's not like the way I hate Catherine Zeta-Jones in a lot of her roles because she's despicable, but I just hate her in general.
Yeah.
But I don't feel, I feel icky, but I'm looking at Craig, and Craig is just disgusting.
Well, and that's actually what I love. You and I were having this conversation off air, as sometimes we do, about how, like, when I was talking about this movie, about having this be the problem with this. Like, are you sure that you remember Cusack? Like, are you sure you remember this movie? Because I do tend to forget things. And I really like the fact that he I mean, when I saw it, I wanted to see John Cusack, and I was not like, I was happy that he was doing this because I do get really kind of bored when actors do this. I mean, the same thing in a way, though I realize, you know, some actors that's a great thing and that totally works.
I
and
did get tired of Hugh Grant.
Yeah, you just get tired of that, especially a non-character, non-comedic actor. Like, I think you just get tired of this. And I wasn't like tired of John Cusack, but I just really like my liking him and seeing him be kind of, like greasy and unattractive do not like kind of live in the same thing. I mean, he's an actor and I want him to be an actor. But I want to go back to like the first opening scenes of John Malkovich when you see him.
Before you get off of the character that John Cusack is playing, I feel like that's a good time where we also probably should talk about the fact that Cameron Diaz is in this movie and not playing a very typical character either.
No.
Like both Craig and Lottie are being played by these like major movie stars who are like not only like personality wise like very unappealing people, but also like they go to great lengths to make them visually unappealing.
Yes.
With, like the hair and the makeup and you know it's
And Catherine Keener even said that she did not think that she was right for the role, but I still think she did a great job.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's this sort of gimmick that happens in Hollywood where they'll take like this very beautiful actress and cover her in makeup to play this sort of esoteric character, and you know, it's the whole Charlize Theron and monster thing where for a while it was kind of like very fashionable among movie nerds to kind of poo-poo that as a gimmick, like, oh well, you know, just pancake a bunch of like ugly makeup on her. But I mean, I think Lottie is a very vividly portrayed character, and I think the whole thing of putting Cameron Diaz in that role, it wouldn't be half as interesting if there weren't such a contrast between Lottie and Maxine.
Yeah.
The fact that like Maxine is like sort of like I don't say like the emotional
she's
center
sharp
of the
edged.
movie. Yeah, but
she's
like I was
put
saying,
together.
yeah, exactly. And very sexualized, and like just the object of like 3 different characters' romantic fixation, and you know, seeing her, you know, and Catherine Keener is a talented actress and a very good looking person in her own right, but the fact that she's like playing off of you know, Cameron Diaz, this like major movie star, is, it makes the movie memorable. So,
yeah, and just like you know, Cameron Diaz, like
it's far from the main thing that makes the movie memorable.
Her posture, her like. The way she speaks, she kind of has this like kind of rabbity thing she does with her face, which is like, you know, kind of unattractive. And yet, you know, you're still like you really feel for Lottie despite
and then
all
you
that.
Don't.
And then,
I don't after a while.
You feel for Lottie and you feel for Craig. Like they're not even early on. I mean, I mean, you knew how the story was going to end, but these are powerfully pathetic people.
No, that's exactly my point. Like, pathetic. I don't feel sympathy for them.
But like they're hurt. I mean, at some point they're hurt. Like I think I felt more sympathy for Lottie like in the beginning. You know, when you see her with him and you're just like, you know, she's taking care of all of these. She's in this, you know, like sort of loveless marriage basically, and she's clearly like. You can see that she's flawed because she's like in this loveless marriage, she's bringing in all of these animals, presumably, because he doesn't remember their names. So you assume that it is her like trying to fill something in her life. And the way that he interacts with her and just her sort of like sad, like, I guess I'll go to bed now. But anyway, which brings us to.
Well, going back to.
Yeah. Oh yeah, going back to like
because you never told me who I was.
Who we're gonna do? I think we should do. I would like to do. I guess like I guess Lottie and Maxine are one, and then Craig and Maxine. I don't know how to put Malkovich in there. I just don't.
I don't think you do.
Know.
And personally, I don't think there's much there with Craig and Maxine because it's only one way, and he fell in love with her as she puts them. No, I'm not going to say that. I have coworkers and brother who lives there. He fell in love with her boobs. There, edited version of it.
So if I could offer a hypothesis here, I feel like the useful thing to do might be to map out the beats of Maxine's character, because I think it's important not to oversimplify that she was just in love with Lottie, or in love with Lottie in Malkovich's body, because I'm curious about what was going on during that whole 8 months.
Totally. Yeah. No, you're right. Maybe the Maxine is the through line.
Well,
I think that's a good thought.
Well, okay. I was fine with that. I just don't understand. Are you saying yes, Craig, or no, Craig?
Yeah, yes, Craig too.
I didn't go to Craig, but okay.
Basically go through Maxine and see what.
Yeah, because she lived as Craig's wife for 8 months. So
Yeah.
What was going on there?
Malkovich's wife, and
Yeah.
just a vessel.
But she did know it was him.
Financial vessel.
And there is a scene where basically she
was the puppeteer. When
the manager.
When Craig was in Malkovich.
Yeah.
Maxine was the puppeteer.
Was metaphorically the puppeteer.
Yes.
Of his career. Yes, I agree.
Well, no, of also him. Dance for me, honey, dance.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, both.
Yeah. So sorry, go ahead.
No. I think and there is a scene where basically, before basically all of the interactions that Maxine has with Malkovich, when she has sex with Malkovich, it's always as Lottie. It's always with Malkovich as Lottie. No, it's like twice, I think, at least.
Well, at least once.
And that was
at least once
for doing it the first time.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
and they keep trying to meet up, but then she realizes, then she knows it's Craig at some point.
Yeah,
and
the first time that happens, she wasn't aware because it was Craig deceiving her. But then after that, she seemed to be agreeable to the whole arrangement.
Yeah.
That it was the first time that Craig realized that he could stay inside Malkovich indefinitely.
Yeah.
He's telling Maxine about this. She's not resisting the idea or anything.
No.
And what was interesting to me was that we're taking Maxine's word that her interest in this was as a way to have sex with Lottie as a man.
Yeah.
And that it wasn't Malkovich's physical form that she was interested in, but with the amount of time that she spent living as his fake wife and carrying his baby, does that mean that maybe she was actually more interested in Malkovich than Lottie after all? That this is Craig and Malkovich has had no Lottie, and yet she's going along with it. Was that because, as we learned during the climax of the plot, that she considers it to be Lottie's baby?
Because she has no interest she's not interested in Malkovich because she could, she can continue, at some point she kind of turns off, it's Malkovich's, it's his 4th birthday. And Craig as Malkovich, she's just totally checking out, right? And they say in the documentary they do about them, which is another really great, great scene.
This is my interpretational question for you.
Yeah.
Why was Maxine hanging around in this arrangement for that 8 months with Craig in the head and Malkovich's body and no Lottie anywhere? What was Maxine getting out of that?
That's what I was been trying to figure out. I think a lot of it is that, Maxine is presented at the beginning. She's a character who is kind of a sociopath. She really is much more she is trying to make money. Her first thing when she finds out about it at the portal is instantly we charge. And this idea of being, as you said, the puppeteer, I think is so attractive. And I guess if you're going to attribute, it's difficult, trying to figure out if it should even attribute sort of this, this deep emotional context to Maxine is something I don't know how I feel about. But I think the big thing is that for me is she's going on in her head, her entire life or her adult life has been about sort of success and manipulating people. And she's got this, Rolodex where she can get John Malkovich's phone number even before this whole thing happens. And so she's like, oh, perfect. This is an opportunity to become Maxine the entrepreneur, as they say in the biography that they put out. And she thinks, because this has been her experience, that she can she thinks that she can just forget about Lottie. Right? I mean, that's one interpretation. I don't know if I buy it. And this is the part that's very, kind of odd to me. So like, she thinks, oh, okay, well, I'll just forget about Lottie because look at what I get. I get to get out of my weird office on the 7.5th floor, which she's clearly like, she's rented and she's got like, she's trying to make it, it's not like she's not working for the company that Craig is working for.
Yeah,
she's renting an office there.
Yeah, we never do find out.
We don't find out what
if she works for another company. But you're saying that she's self-employed and renting that office space on her own.
Yeah, because you never see anybody there.
Well, I don't necessarily know if that's the case, but it is possible. There's multiple spaces being rented out. So
it seems like a solid theory actually, based on like we see her sitting in her office. She's just alone in there.
Yeah. And she's just talking to people and calling them, and she's getting in and out. But yeah, you never see her like another employee. You see her kind of having her an hour. She's like, she knows a lot of people. She's connected. She knows the bartender. She knows she can call up and get John Malkovich's phone number. So the kindest interpretation is that Maxine just realizes that she's no longer that person because she has fallen in love, and that basically the whole pregnancy thing has made her realize this, but I don't know. I don't know if it's just like it's a plot device, because it's so odd that like during this whole thing, she never, like during the 8 months, she never looks up Lottie. She never tries to meet with her in secret. She never obviously is like, just, it's like, oh, well, this just works for me. I mean, I think maybe at base she just is a sociopath. I mean, at the end you see her with the baby. You see her with they're in a happy family. They have the kid. But if
she were truly a sociopath, she would have aborted the baby, and she said that she would have if she hadn't been in love with Lottie.
If she knew it was Lottie. So maybe it is that like, kind of she realizes that she's really in love with Lottie when she realizes it's the baby, which happens off screen and you never see it.
Yeah, I think I like your interpretation, because like she's clearly, when she's living the good life as the wife of a celebrity, it doesn't, that definitely seems to be an end in itself for her. And so I would say that I think the climax with the baby is evidence enough that she was in love with Lottie, but I don't think it was that to the exclusion of other motivations. I don't think being in love was ever the primary thing for her.
Yeah.
Even though it certainly was for Lottie.
I don't understand what you mean by that.
Well, I think she still liked the idea of being in love with Lottie and carrying Lottie's baby, so to speak, enough that, that she still shouted that out when push came to shove at the end. But she didn't feel that strongly enough to, give up on this whole Malkovich thing and just go be with her, or to push back against, Craig being in Malkovich all the time, which is disrupting the prior arrangement that she had with Lottie. I'm not even sure if that would have worked out. But
it's
the
financial.
Point is,
why she held on to it is that financial, and what was the purpose of going back to Lottie if it was just going to rock?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess what I'm saying is I think this is a person who doesn't totally know what she wants. Like, she wants the financial thing, but she still kind of wants to be with Lottie, and she doesn't approach that decision in a healthy way because she's crazy and a sociopath.
Well, no, she waited for Lottie to come back into the picture. And so in that particular instance, it was something had to force her hand. So which it did. Well, it did, and also it did seem like she was just like borderline, like, once I get this baby out of me, I'm gonna kill myself. The way she was behaving in the last few minutes.
Kill herself or ditch Craig, or
I don't know. I don't even know about ditching it, because I don't even think that. Why would she lose the financial stability of it? So just the way she was going, it was like postpartum depression, if that makes any sense. Is there prepartum depression?
I'm sure there's
probably
is.
Interesting.
I mean, it seemed like, you see that scene of her like with Lottie's puppet,
Yeah.
And she's like,
Didn't she say I'm sorry?
yeah, I'm sorry, and
Yeah.
I love you, and all this stuff.
Yeah. So okay. So if I'm getting this straight, you think it happened somewhere in the 8 months that Maxine?
I think before
realized that
she
was love, or do
she
you
had a
think it was-
crush on her.
Well, she definitely was attracted to her early.
Yeah,
She admitted as such. She's not afraid of admitting it.
yeah.
You?
I don't think Maxine was all the way there until the denouement, pretty much.
The kidnapping.
Or like
That's French.
after,
That's French for kidnapping, right?
of course. No, like pretty much like at the end of the movie when we see them together, like that's their happily ever after, which is being contrasted with Craig, who's getting his karmic comeuppance, trapped in just forced to watch them. But yeah, I feel like everything up to that point, Maxine was not really like. I think she thought she was in love with Lottie, but clearly not enough to put aside the fame and fortune.
But I don't even know if it's just about fame and fortune too. It's like it was also about shaping this career and doing this insane thing.
Being the puppeteer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so like
So
it's
fame,
like
fortune, and power. maybe
yeah,
you
it's
would
like
say.
wait, I can get this guy who's a puppeteer because I'm gonna make it's just such a brilliant ruse, right? Like you take something that's so like kind of esoteric and strange, and the kind of puppetry that Craig does is like really weird and lifelike in like almost to a ridiculous, insane degree.
Yeah,
like
it's creepy, actually.
Yeah, and it's not a very it's not a very big like insight to say that this is like a major theme of the movie.
Yes.
That they lay it on pretty thick, and I think it's even interesting that when in the very early scene where Craig has just met Maxine for the first time, and then he goes home and he's kind of working out his attraction by making a puppet out of her.
Yeah.
It's hinting.
Gross.
What?
It was gross.
Yeah, it was pretty creepy.
Yeah.
And part of what made it creepy was that like half of it was about wanting to possess her or to be with her, but half of it was also about wanting to control her or possibly just to be her, which of course resonates with the being of John Malkovich. And I was kind of curious, like how much does Craig just want to be Maxine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nope.
And then
Well, to have that confidence and to have that,
to be
that sort
confident,
of
to be cool enough to keep up with her.
Yeah.
And then that's mirrored in Maxine wanting to perhaps be Malkovich or to be like Malkovich, at least in this sort of superficial way of being a powerful Hollywood artiste who's respected and famous.
Wait, I don't think Maxine ever actually goes into the portal until she does to save her own life, and then she just ends up in a subconscious.
Yeah, she's
yeah,
not. Yeah,
yeah.
she's
No,
not.
well, I mean,
Yeah.
and that's
She
like what
wasn't
Diane was
interested.
saying. Like when I'm
Yeah.
saying that she wanted to be like him, I'm not saying. Yeah, I mean, as a contrast to all the people who want to literally be him by being in the portal, Maxine wanted to control him as a metaphorical puppeteer. So
Yeah. Okay. So, much like the understanding of the movie itself, I think we got there. But
Somehow.
yeah. Okay. So, big question. What happens next?
I think they kind of give that to us.
They give
I
you
mean,
a point, but is that it? Is that the end? The end?
well, I guess
Because that would be way too convenient.
Well, yeah, I mean, aside from some of the crazy fan theories, we can ask ourselves, like, do you think Maxine and Lottie are going to go the distance in their lesbian marriage?
Were they necessarily married?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they were
yeah,
coupled. Like they
it
were
was
raising
definitely-
a child together. They were obviously really close.
Yeah, I mean,
No, I got that. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
That
and
doesn't
lots of
necessarily mean
physical
they're married.
contact.
No,
yeah, I know. I'm just
Long-term
saying
relationship.
it was communicated to the audience that they were at least like common law married.
Yeah.
So, and that this was meant to be like a permanent relationship because they're raising this daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But
yeah, do we
considering-
think it'll last?
Well, what was it? 7 years later?
Yeah, it was 7 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
7.
So, do you think that because they've made it the 7 years, is there no itchiness there? Or do you think they're going to keep going and then just she goes off to college the end? Or do you think it's some old habits are going to die hard and she's going to potentially have a roving eye? Maybe Lottie will have a different type of awakening. Maybe her flightiness is going to cause Maxine to stray.
If they've made it 7 years, I wonder if there are like predictive statistics for body controlling lesbians.
I don't know if it's like but there's like drop offs, and they're weirdly not the 7 years, but they're drop-offs in relationships, and they're not, they don't necessarily drop off at 8, but I know one of them, which strangely is like at around 18 years, being together for 18 years.
Oh,
When the child is an adult?
When the child is an adult and then they...
No, it's actually, that's what I thought, and looking into this, and I have to admit that I looked into this mostly because close friends of mine who had been together for 19 years, actually at kind of around this time that this movie came out. Actually, not really, but regardless, I was like, well, I kind of, like, oh, well, once you're together for 18 years, like, I mean, that's kind of it, right? Like, you're not going to go back, which I know is ridiculous, but I was just curious, like, how often does this happen? And they were childless. And and it's actually one of the theories that I was reading was about the fact that you kind of reach this point where, because, in every relation, like long-term relationship, you're having the same fight over and over again, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah. And basically it's this point where you're either like, okay, well, this is just a fight we have and it's fine. Or you're like, this is never going to stop. And it's unbearable and nothing is, there's not a sense of it growing and changing. So I don't know, but there must be some significance to the 7-year mark that he picked. But I don't know what
maybe.
it is.
I mean, that might depend on whether that final scene was meant to really focus on whatever happened to Lottie and Maxine, or is it meant to highlight whatever happened to Craig and he's living this
or a little bit of both.
Hey, let's not also discount the fact that that was the point where Dr. Lester, as John Malkovich, decided to open up the possibilities to Charlie Sheen. So that's a very important point in the relationship.
Do we think Charlie Sheen goes for it?
Why wouldn't he?
Yeah,
that
leaves us with the very creepy implication that Emily is, that the little girl is only going to get to be herself for 44 years of her life, and then she's going to have to go through the same thing and cease to exist as a person.
Now, are they aware of that? I mean, Lottie's aware of that. Yeah. So, like, what does that play?
And that's the other thing. Is that going to be something where Lottie will try to stop it? Maxine will say, no, this is inevitable. This is a potential rift as well.
Or would Lottie be aware that because clearly she's aware of the whole conspiracy itself, but would she know that it's going to happen to her daughter?
He told her there that she is the vessel. Because
he shouted it out like during the that might have been when they were already running off with the gun, though.
He shouted that, but he also, when she was talking about her obsession with John Malkovich, he said that the child being carried by his wife is the vessel. So there was a photo and an arrow.
Right.
And then
there was a pictogram.
And I remember the pictogram. And did that also make it clear that like she herself would be the next step in this?
I don't know.
So do you think Maxine is also gonna stay because she's like, oh, well, this is a chance to live forever?
Who? I'm sorry?
I mean, do you think Maxine, one of the reasons she's going to stay in the relationship is because basically she wants to stay in the club of people who live forever?
Still in contact with Lester, and they're all just going along with this plan to put everyone into their daughter, which is
I don't think that's the case.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't.
Know. Okay.
No.
Well, they are that sociopathic. I mean, it's within the realm of possibility.
Maxine?
Yeah.
Well, Maxine is that sociopathic, so you think that she'd bring Lottie on the journey and use their daughter to live forever?
I don't know. Possibly.
Okay.
I mean, they never really deal with that.
Well, can we get some sort of what you think is going to happen afterwards?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm inclined to think that the purpose of that scene is to show that like things really have worked out for them, which is sort of an odd thing for this movie's sense of morality is kind of warped all over the place. That these characters who don't deserve a happy ending are getting one. The other thing about thinking of that relationship as a really long-term thing instead of something that just happens over the events of the movie, I kind of feel like one of the elephants in the room that we're dancing around is the fact that Maxine is established pretty early on to be heterosexual, and that the whole motivating part of the plot is that she's attracted to Lottie as a person, but only because she can be with her when she's in a man's body. And that raises some interesting questions about, like, is that something that Maxine just adjusted to, or is that possibly going to sow some seeds of dissatisfaction because, Lottie was already in one sort of loveless and physically unfulfilling marriage. And we never really get into, like, just how intimate they are when they're, like, are they just sort of living as life partners?
It seems so intimate.
Yeah.
I mean, they're hugging, they're touching, they're like, that whole scene of them together is so, like, they're just so playful with each other, and you see them, like, touching, and you see them, like, holding each other, and you see them constantly physically interacting in that way that I think people who are attracted to each other do, which is they just make up excuses to touch each other.
I don't understand.
I don't even.
But it does make me wonder how much of it is, like, is this still really a romantic bond between them, or is it just, like, it's definitely an intimate and emotional bond, but is it they're bonded over their daughter?
I don't know. Just, I guess, like, I see them. I guess
of so many parents that I know who are so not bonded over their children.
Yes. So that's, like, a good thing, because even the way that their daughter looks at them with these, like, kind of watching them and, like, oh, one day, like, she just looks at them so, like, longingly and lovingly.
I think she knows she has Craig in there, and she's just messing with him.
But, like, I don't know. I mean, I think either, sexuality is fluid. I feel like the whole thing, I think Maxine really likes newness, or thinks she does. Like, I think if you're going to be kind to her, you'd say basically she's somebody who was convinced that something was going to make her happy. And she found out that actually it makes her miserable, and that like she thought that, living this sort of this life, sort of being the man, the entrepreneur, the puppeteer, or supporting a career, basically, being responsible for helping somebody else be successful, and the money and all of this stuff was going to make her happy, and she ends up rather miserable. And that maybe she realizes that actually, like, all these ideas I had about myself are kind of wrong, and that actually, like, there is a lot more to, like, there's something, this idea of self that she put on every day. I mean, she wears, like, she sort of puts on this really hard makeup. Her hair is really angular. Her clothes are really angular. She has this, like, very hard exterior, and maybe part of this sort of change is realizing how, like, this extra self that she put on didn't feel right anymore, and it was just a suit.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I'd like to build on it a little bit, because the impression that we get from her early in the movie isn't just that she's, like, this very hard-shelled and self-assured and ambitious person, but that she's also very seductive and charismatic and sexualized. And if this is a relationship where, like, not to doubt that maybe it was a matter of fluid sexuality for her, but maybe it also represented, like you were saying, a rethinking of what she was really looking for. And maybe if the relationship is less physically fulfilling for her than when she was, with a man's body, but that could be, that could reflect a rethinking of what she wants, like you were saying, not just about not being so much of an ambitious entrepreneur type person, but also not being so much of a sexually aggressive person anymore either. And that this is more of a, and like many people, as they age, they realize, like, oh, maybe this is more the kind of love that's actually going to make me happy.
I mean, she may be really sexually aggressive with Lottie. We don't know.
Maybe so. Yeah, we only get the 2 minutes, and
but I think a big part of her sexuality too in the beginning, every time you see her really use it, it's to get something she wants. Like, she's used to, I think, using, like, you see that really manipulative kind of sexuality. Like when she says to Craig, like, just be honest, you're really into my tits.
Right.
You know, and so anyway, Diana, what do you think?
Oh, okay. Well, you just kind of tapped what I was saying because you're talking about, his relationship with Lottie. Is this one of these things where, she's noted as heterosexual? But I will just say, no. She's had sex with men in this movie that we've seen. But what I'm looking at, especially when it comes to the personality that she's showing, is she is an opportunist. And so having sex with a man, especially in the context of this movie, is an opportunity. So for all we know, she would be having as much sex with women who she might have the preference for if it had an opportunity attached to it, but
There
then
you
we
go.
wouldn't have a movie right there.
Yeah.
I think that, with the whole Malkovich situation, there's an opportunity, so she uses it. And with Lottie, I think there's something there. I mean, she may be outwardly presenting that she's into men, but there's also a power dynamic that she might be able to use to feed her own sociopathy. Is that a word that I used correctly?
And it could be, I mean, she's equally attracted to both.
She could be equally attracted to both. And in this particular thing, I think, to answer the question of what happens afterwards, she's with Lottie. She has declared, I mean, she's fighting for her life in the final scenes, but she also, you could say that she kept the baby for this. I honestly believe that she kept the baby because she believes it to be Lottie's baby and she loves Lottie. And that was the last connection to her because of this horrible betrayal. She never thought she was ever going to see her again. And so when she does come back to life, again, Lottie is the one who's pushing it forward and making it happen because of the whole faux kidnapping to get Craig out of Malkovich. She decided to just take a chance, admit the whole thing. Maxine and Lottie decides to forgive her, and that's a basis of them, and they start their life together. And for Maxine, that's transformational because for once, it's not about her financial security or her manipulation. She's putting herself out there, and she manages to succeed because with Lottie, it's something solid and real. Although it's solid and real for them, but I still think it's very surface level from what we saw. But
yeah,
I mean,
we only see them for 3 minutes.
Well, no, not that.
Not even.
No, I'm talking about the 8 months that Lottie is stewing.
Yeah.
And the, all the time afterwards. So I think that afterwards, in that 8 months, that isn't exactly afterwards for the movie, I think that that's them rebuilding their trust. Rebuilding their relationship and building a child together, which Lottie wanted a child. So she also gets to pin that onto their relationship.
Oh my God, I totally forgot about that. It's one of the first scenes in the movie where she says, do you want to have a baby? And he's like, yeah, when the puppet thing takes off.
Well, yeah. Well, he was saying when we're a little more economically stable. So, which is kind of interesting because it's exactly what's happening is that she's getting somebody walking away from economic stability to have a baby with her. So it's a complete, beautiful, reflection of what she gets versus what she was wanting versus what she should have. And so with Maxine, there's something there. I don't want to cheat, but there is rumblings and it moves into spoiler territory. But if you go into the fan theories of the connection between the movie Get Out and being John Malkovich because Catherine Keener is in both movies.
Yeah, I totally thought about that.
Please see both of those movies and then go ahead and read up the theories and then go read up on what Jordan Peele has said about said theories. And that's what I'm going to say about that.
Okay.
It's really interesting because it's spoilerific.
Academy Award winner Jordan
Peele.
I love that.
So deserved. Get Out was amazing.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's one of my favorite movies of last year.
So that's what I think it is. And I think they're going to go the distance, although the fact that there is a little bit of when their daughter turns 44 problem to it. I'm not going to go the sociopath that they're going to live for other things. I think they're going to say that this whole portal experience has granted them their life together. And so they're going to reach an understanding with Dr. Lester and his people to treat their child well, but also accept the fate of their child.
Do you think they would go into the portal?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so.
I mean, I could see that happening because they would be in their 70s at that point, and considering that they're already taking a very blasé attitude toward all the Malkovich stuff, I could definitely see them saying like, oh yeah, this way we'll be with our daughter forever, it'll be beautiful. And it's also horrible, but
I'm also going to amend that because where does the next vessel come from?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
The next one after Emily.
Yeah. I'm not even sure where that goes. So I
Yeah,
bet you.
I know, yeah,
I bet you.
that's
You know what I
right.
think is going to happen? Well, no, I don't
Okay.
think that's necessarily going to work. But I'm going to amend that, and I think they're going to be doing some serious research on where the next vessel is and if it's possible for the portal to be moved or something to that effect.
Yeah,
Or maybe they'll go on a killing spree. I don't know.
because like some fans of this movie have asked like where like the body Lester, who was a vessel for Mr. Burton, came from in the first place, because he's not blood related to John Malkovich as far as we know.
Allegedly.
Yeah, I mean there are some fan theories that he was like, you know,
But not like, remember, it's like the friends, right? It's like a bunch of friends. So it's not
I think he said
necessarily.
that was the first time he invited
That's the
anyone
first time
else
he invited
along.
friends.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I
Yeah,
didn't get that.
All right, so possible killing spree, but I
Yeah.
don't think so. There's good- they're going to go into research.
It's a first.
mode and
It's a
figure it
first
out.
time for the podcast when we've introduced the possible killing spree as
Well-
a future.
Well,
I hope
much
it
like,
won't be the last.
well, much like the fact that Lottie tried to kill Maxine in the subconscious of the first vessel, you know, they're going to have to accept the inevitability of the fact that is to one killing spree begets another.
It's true. Once you've held a gun and pointed at someone's head.
No, that's happened a lot in this movie.
But I mean, yeah, like for Lottie, it kind of opens up a certain like, hey, I can do this.
Well, I actually was going the opposite, where it's just like, this is where their relationship began. They're not going to do that again. They're going to accept that they were able to have the 44 years that they did.
Mm-hmm.
The violence stops here.
Okay.
Yeah.
The violence stops here.
And the episode does too.
Yes.
If they're going to be slipping back into old ways, do you think they'd ever sell trips into their daughter's brain for $200?
She's not that interesting.
Yeah. I mean, John Malkovich. It's like, it's a
$100?
good story.
Oh. Also, that could get really creepy. It's one thing when you're going to John Malkovich. It's another thing when you're going to a 7-year-old girl.
Well, we 40. Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's
Creepy.
It could be later.
creepy.
Still creepy.
It
Still.
was never not creepy.
Well, can they?
Yeah.
I don't think they can get access back into the portal. What part of I'm trying to wrap this episode up?
Sorry.
All right,
I'm
let's
a
do
bad
it
guest.
because we could talk about this all night.
Kind of did. All right.
So.
So thank you much. Being John Malkovich, we kind of almost covered it, and we
Or
didn't really get.
we scratched
far
the
into-
surface.
We scratched something. I
Yeah,
don't know.
the portal. I don't know. I can't.
So
Can't.
please share us your thoughts, and when it's on Twitter. I'm sorry you're so limited on the tiny character count. GIF us your favorite
Yes.
John Malkovich moments.
There you go. And so that's HEAMCast, HEAMCAST. And you can also find us on Facebook for Happily Ever Aftermath.
Yep, and we are at contact@heamcast.com. And I know that we got you a little bit excited when we started talking about Cusack.
I know.
And considering that we, the Malkovich count was a lot higher than the Cusack count.
Mm-hmm.
Although, if you were paying really, really close attention, I got some little subtle references in there.
You did? You got
Yeah.
some in?
Oh yeah, and if you can tweet me,
There's
if you
probably
you
some I
caught a few.
missed because that's what I do.
You didn't get the Team America thing.
I kind of got that, didn't I? I don't know. Anyway.
He was taking your interpretation very seriously.
Yeah, I was being very serious.
Matt Damon. Okay,
I am
so
also on Twitter. You can find me retweeting HEAMCast.
Just look for anyone who retweets
Happy to
HEAMCast.
chime in on the discussion of this episode.
yeah, and then shout out to the Lady Pod Squad because there's an awesome supportive group of women, and I'd like to hijack the podcast for a second and give my love to High Expectations podcast because they were wonderful people when I was looking for a little bit of support recently, and I appreciate it very much, ladies.
Oh.
And that said, their podcast, High Expectations, named after Great Expectations and High Fidelity, which we'll be talking about next episode. Smooth transition.
That was masterful.
I made it happen to where they were wonderful people, where they supported me, and they also magically started to name their podcast after something that we'll be talking about next episode.
That was really genius, and it made me want to reread Great Expectations.
Smooth.
So I don't. It's the whole thing. It's a lot of wants.
It's we're gonna be slowly working our way from creepy Cusack who needs a shower to creepy Cusack who needs to stop talking because he's a jerk face to eventually gentle Cusack.
Yes.
Hint, hint.
Yes.
And tell us your favorite
I'm sure you know where
Cusacks.
this is going to go.
And also, the Cutaways did January, so you can go
Yep.
back to their episodes where they managed to cover.
Yeah, we like January is beautiful. I'm really, really, speaking of masterful, beautifully done, guys.
So you mean to tell me there's another romantic comedy podcast out there that's doing John Cusack movies before us?
Yes. We're just redundant.
We suck.
Yeah. But,
All right.
people have to clean their gutters. And so they need something to listen to when they can't listen to the cutaways.
I don't know what? What about gutters? We're bowling? I'm not doing the Big Lebowski.
No, we can't do the Big Lebowski.
This is your new niche.
Yeah,
Big
it's like
Lebowski?
No, gutters.
gutters. People need to do something while they're cleaning. People need to listen to something while they clean their gutters.
Oh.
Not here, not in Northern California, but in other parts of the country, people have gutters to clean.
It could be you.
Yeah.
They're listening to.
So confused right now.
It's just because you live in Northern California, you don't have to clean gutters. Neither do I, really.
Stop bragging about how we live in Northern California. And don't clean gutters.
See, just even by saying we're bragging, maybe it's could be terrible here.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes. Good
Yeah.
night.
And thank you for having me on. This was so much fun.
Oh, it was so good. It was so good to have you on.
All right, now let's go home and feed the dog.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go home, but separately, just to be clear.